ਇੱਕ ਓੰਕਾਰ ਸਤਨਾਮ ਕਰਤਾ ਪੁਰਖ ਨਿਰਭਉ ਨਿਰਵੈਰ ਅਕਾਲ ਮੂਰਤ ਅਜੂਨੀ ਸੈਭੰ ਗੁਰ ਪ੍ਰਸਾਦ ਜਪ ਆਦ ਸਚ ਜੁਗਾਦ ਸਚ ਹੈ ਭੀ ਸਚ ਨਾਨਕ ਹੋਸੀ ਭੀ ਸਚ कहाँ बुध प्रभ तुच्छ हमारी बरन सकै महिमा जो दहारी हम ना सख्त कर सिफत तुम्हारी आप लिहो तुम कथा सुधारी हम ना सख्त कर सिफत तुम्हारी आप लिहो तुम कथा सुधारी।
सतनाम श्री वाहिगुरु दोहरा फिर सतगुर सुन परबते उतर बड़ो सुदेश सिद्ध साध सुनते कणे देवी देव महेश फिर सतगुर सुन परबते।
वाहिगुरु जी का खालसा वाहिगुरु जी की फतेह। We're blessed to be in the company of Dhamma Sahib Sri Guru Granth Sahib Ji Maharaj, reflecting on the Guru Ityas, the history of our Gurus. So Bhai Ratan Singh Ji, who has been telling Captain Murray of the travels of Guru Nanak Dev Ji through the south of India, throughout Punjab, west to Mecca. Now Bhai Sahib Ji talks about Guru Nanak Sahib Ji's journey through to the north, where Guru Nanak Sahib Ji travelled through many mountainous regions.
दोहरा फिर सतगुर सुन परबते उतर बड़ो सुदेश।
So Bhai Ratan Singh Ji tells us that Guru Nanak Dev Ji now set off to the mountains. Guru Nanak Dev Ji went north from Punjab through the mountains that we know, the Himalayas, starting at Sri Anandpur Sahib. Guru Nanak Dev Ji travelled all through the mountainous regions from there. And each place where Guru Nanak Dev Ji went, Guru Nanak Dev Ji spread the message of truth.
सिद्ध साध सुनते कणे देवी देव महेश।
Guru Nanak Dev Ji had heard that these mountains were very holy places, that within these mountains there were many saints, many siddhs, many yogis with miraculous powers, and that Shivji himself resided within these mountains. So Shivji, one of the primal three Hindu deities, is known as the destroyer, and many people were engaged in the worship of Shivji in India and still are today. So Shivji, who different ways in which people worship him or worshipped him at Guru Nanak Dev Ji's time as well will come up in today's Katha. And in the same way, where Guru Nanak Dev Ji went to Mecca and gave the message of God's name to the Musliman, in the same way Guru Nanak Dev Ji travelling through the Hindu world also gave this upadesh towards Naam Simran. So in Hindu texts there is much debate as to whether Shivji, Brahma or Vishnu gave birth to each other. In Sikhi, Guru Sahib Ji tells us that all three of them took birth from Shabad. All three of them took birth from sound. Omkar kiya sab prakasha. That through that Tuni, from that Avad, from that Shabad, everything else came to be. And everything that is within that is within Maya, within creation, within the illusion. And that Shivji and Vishnu and Brahma are two contained within this illusion. And for this reason, Guru Nanak Dev Ji tried to bring humanity towards a more enlightened way of understanding, where one should worship the divine who has given birth to all else that exists. So for this reason, Guru Nanak Dev Ji decided that it would be fruitful to take a yatra, to take a journey through the mountainous areas of the north. Guru Nanak Dev Ji said, by travelling through that area, I will be able to see everything with my own eyes. What is the truth? What is the falsehood that is being practiced? How are people practicing righteousness? And in other ways, how other people are being greedy. And in this way, seeing all this from my own eyes, I will be able to discern and understand the ways of the world by travelling and meeting different folk from the mountains. So Nihil are the bottom of the mountains. Pratham means first. Bhai Ratan Singh Ji tells us that first Guru Nanak Dev Ji ascended to the lower parts of the mountain region, the base of the mountains, as we say, for example, in Punjab, when we start going towards the mountains. We can think of travelling to Anantosad, sitting at the very hill at the very bottom of these mountains, and as we go up maybe towards Baborsad and Anantosad and cross the now modern day state of Punjab, we begin to ascend further up the mountains. But naturally, as one would do so, they would begin at the foot of the mountains, and this is what Guru Nanak Dev Ji did first.
Kaliyan chad fir toliyan vade.
So Kaliyan meaning black, Bhai Ratan Singh Ji tells us that first the mountains were black and then Toliyan meaning white. So Guru Nanak Dev Ji began and ascended mountains all the way to the point where Guru Nanak Dev Ji was in snow-peaked parts of the world. So we know this from our own travels in mountains. When we first go, the mountains may be rocky, and then when we start getting towards the top, it may be so cold and so icy that everything is covered by snow. And Bhai Ratan Singh Ji tells us that Guru Nanak Dev Ji travelled all of these parts of the mountain regions.
Jagha jagha jo sabhi lakhaiye.
Bhai Ratan Singh Ji says, if I was to tell you the name of each of the places, it would not be possible for me to narrate all of this.
Granth badan te manho samkaiye.
Over and over again, as I am speaking of and writing of this history of Guru Nanak Dev Ji, I am constantly having to remind myself that if I go into detail, there will be no end to how much information I would be giving.
Jinko lod sunan ki hoye.
But whoever does need this information, whoever is interested in this information, then Bhai Ratan Singh Ji directs them towards sources that specialize in this part of our history.
Aur pustak te sun le soye.
Or meaning other, pustak meaning text or composition, or granth, sune meaning to listen. So Bhai Ratan Singh Ji is telling us you can listen to those both things. So we've spoken about this before, that Guru Sikhs wouldn't always tell people to go and read this granth or go and look at this granth. They would say listen to the sermons of these granths. Because what happens, and we see this a lot in the modern day, where people come across pre-colonial Sikhi texts and see that in those times there were many different practices. Sikhi was very, very diverse. In times of war, people came into the Sikh fold adopting some of those practices and maybe not fully understanding it and leading to others. So when we look at these historical sources, we need not just an understanding of that, but we need an understanding of Gurmat that comes from Gurbani, that comes from Sri Guru Granth Sahib Ji. And for this reason, Guru Sikhs would advise people to listen to Katha. Listen to Katha that is being performed by one who has learnt these texts. Suno Bhai Ratan Singh Ji said, we're not saying paro and read with you our understanding, because maybe in the West we have this perception of we should read ourselves and we should read ourselves and understand ourselves and apply that. And it is correct that we should look to do so. But then when we estimate the amount of effort and detail to derive at a suitable understanding, arrive at a Gurmat understanding of these things, and we seek to do so without a basis in Gurmat, without a basis in Gurbani, without a basis or an understanding of Guru Granth Sahib Ji, then we risk not just getting lost ourselves, but deluding many others as well. And for this reason, Bhai Ratan Singh Ji advised us that listen to the Katha of these. They're referring here to primarily the Janam Sakhis written by Bhai Balaji.
Dohra jeh Satguru ji tab puje dekhyo theek na koye.
And Bhai Ratan Singh Ji says, when Guru Nanak Dev Ji arrived towards the mountain regions and saw the practices that people were getting there, they will take theek na koye. Theek meaning okay, and Bhai Ratan Singh Ji says that nothing in Guru Nanak Dev Ji's eyes looked like it was right, looked like it was okay at that time. And in essence, everything that Guru Nanak Dev Ji saw at that time, Guru Nanak Dev Ji is seeing a lot wrong in the way that people are living and practicing religion.
Devi Dev o mad matu ling pujak paisoe.
So Guru Nanak Dev Ji saw the different things that people were worshipping here. Devi, Dev, Ling being some of the examples that we mentioned, as well as Mari. So let's look at what each of these are. So Devi is the feminine divine in one sense, and in another sense is various expressions of that feminine divine. So in Hindu thought, people see the primal deity either often as Lakshmi, if it is wealth that they're interested in, or they see the primal deity as Parvati, if it is Shivji that they worship. And there is another view on this where the Devi is actually the feminine energy of God themselves. But very few people worship or recognize the feminine, the Devi, in this way, and instead worship her in much smaller forms. And similarly, the Dev, so Dev meaning God, Dev meaning it's a respectful term that we use where we call someone Guru Dev, my God teacher, for example. However, in the context of the Sanatana Mata at the time, many people were involved in worshipping these small gods and believing them to be their God, the God who is above all other gods, the supreme God. And this would be for everything, ranging from the weather, praying for the rain, from the rain god, praying from, protection from the sea god if traveling into the sea. And there is a way in which, if we look at how this was happening in Europe at the same times, we saw many of these practices eradicate at the time that Christianity spread and became predominant over paganism, where people believed instead in one god rather than many gods. But it is not that Sikhi came and said all of these gods are false, all of these gods don't exist. It is that Sikhi came and said Ek Onkar, that there is one God who is the cause of all of these other gods, that is the supreme God, and that God has no form. So worshipping him in the form of these smaller entities are in essence a very shallow, so to say, is a very human approach to we want something we can see, we want something that is tangible, we want something we can understand, where the very nature of God as the transcendent being is beyond our understanding, beyond our form, and it is in surrendering ourselves to that that we in fact come closer to that. So the other thing people worship is the dead. People worship the dead, and in our culture sometimes people make a joke that while people's elders are alive, they don't care for them, they don't serve them, they don't feed them, but when they die they begin to worship them. And many people did this at the time, where they would build shrines for the dead. These things are ill-advised because when the soul leaves the body, the best thing for it at that time is to move on in its onwards journey and not be stuck to its physical body, not be stuck to its family, not attached to these things. And in this way, by worshipping them, by creating muttis, by creating homes that become a place essentially where people believe that these spirits could reside, it is neither good for the people left behind or the people who begin to be worshipped, because it doesn't allow them to be liberated from this world, having even left it physically in death. And we see these muttis not just in India, if we go to other parts of the world, for example in Thailand, people will have small shrines outside their homes dedicated to their ancestors, dedicated to different spirits. And then again, it is not to dismiss all of these outright and say that the rest of the world shouldn't practice them. Certainly within Sikhi, and in particular the Rubani of Guru Gobind Singh Ji, even in the Swaraya Maharaj speaks against these practices. But it's to say, if you can worship your ancestors, if you can worship the dead, if you can worship certain spirits, then it would be better to instead use that act, time, energy, effort and focus of worship towards the one who created all of this play, because all else within the play are subject to death, and there is only one being who is not, and that is the creator. And finally, the other thing that Guru Nanak Dev Ji speaks of is ling. So predominant in Hindu worship is the worship of the ling. The ling is predominantly features in those who worship Shivji and can be found within each and every mandir, and also many people have this within their homes. So firstly, there's maybe, well, we try to understand it because Sikhi is very nuanced. It is not entirely and completely black and white, but it is simple as well. So we know the story, for example, of Bhagavad Gita. And Bhagavad Gita, the ling is basically represents the male organ and represents Shivji. It represents the creator. And Bhagavad Gita wanted one of these to worship, and because he was a simple jug, the priest tricked him and gave him a very simple stone. And Bhagavad Gita worshipped this stone and had love for God and believed that this stone was his God, that God essentially manifest. And we say then that Bhagavad Gita found God in a stone. But the lesson there is that Bhagavad Gita's devotion was such that he found God in a stone. It is not, the lesson there is not that God can be found in a stone. The lesson there is Bhagavad Gita's devotion is the Bhagati, is the love of the devotee by which the divine manifests. It is not by these rituals that the individuals are immersed within. And also, it's such an ancient form of worship. It's such an ancient form of worship and represents humanity throughout millennia, but it doesn't talk to the evolved consciousness that Guru Nanak Dev Ji tries to bring about in the world by saying that even Shivji is subject to Kal, even Shivji is subject to death, even Shivji is subject to Maya. He is the Tamogun within the Trigun. He is 1/3 of the three energies that come together and make up Maya. That beyond each of these is Nirankar. Beyond each of these is one who is eternal. Beyond each of these is the one who infuses the power within Dharma, Vishnu and Shivji. And so when we look towards idol worship, when we look towards these parts of religion, we lose the essence and the focus on Paramatma, on Nirankar, on the formless one. And Guru Gobind Singh Ji says, Mahadev ko kahat sada seva, Nirankar ka chinat nahi dev. That calling Mahadev, which is another name for Shivji, calling him as the eternal one, people forget that there is a formless one who is the one who is eternal. So these are all the things that Guru Nanak Dev Ji saw happening at that time. People worshipping the dead, people worshipping stones, and people worshipping small gods and goddesses.
Chaupai Jehkit Baba Ji Jave Des.
Bhai Ratan Singh Ji says, wherever Guru Nanak Dev Ji felt like, Guru Nanak Dev Ji travelled and saw these things.
Teh Naam Dridave Sat Upades.
And Guru Nanak Dev Ji gave the message, Dridava. Dridava means to implant within someone something at depth. And what did Guru Nanak Dev Ji do? The Sat Upadesh of Naam. So Guru Nanak Dev Ji immersed people within the practice of Naam. What is Naam? So Guru Bani speaks of Naam almost in every shabad, that to try and give a short, concise explanation is perhaps too difficult a thing to do. It is not an easy thing to do, and in many ways that Guru Bani tells us that the mehma, the praise of those who take the Naam cannot even be said. And what really can we say about Naam? But in terms of a practical practice, Naam is the act of taking God's name. Naam is the act of worshipping the Lord. So even if we look at Shivji, let's come back to this example. Shivji himself is immersed within the name of Ram. Shivji himself is immersed within the name of Ram. And Banaras is a city where people believe that they could go to get the Ram mantra from Shiva. So when Shivji himself is immersed within the jap of Ram, then maybe as the followers of Shivji, it is more prudent to take the same name that Shivji is chanting of that divine, rather than just worshipping him. And this is what the Guru does. Ultimately, the Satguru is one with the Lord. The Satguru is one with Akalpur. And Guru Nanak Dev Ji doesn't join us to themselves in as much as they join us to Shabad, in as much as they join us to that primal sound through the act of chanting, coming back to what is Naam. So Nama Maharaj Ji tells us that it's something that we can simmer. Naam is something that we can remember, God's name. Naam is something that we can jap. Naam is something that we can chant. Naam is something that we can lean on. Naam is something that is our support. And Naam is something that will go with us after we die. And in the 4 yugs, not just in the 4 yugs, not just in the 4 ages, but also in the 4 Vedas. Ved, Pran, Simrat, Sudakira, Kine Ram Naam Ek Akira. Guru Arjan Dev Ji says that if we study the Vedas diligently and look for the essence of truth within them and the Simritis, we will find that the true message is to meditate upon the name of God. So moving away from rituals that humanity were immersed in, maybe from the beginning of time, and we look at these as early ways of worship and early ways of spirituality, Guru Nanak Dev Ji tells people to search for the divine within themselves by the practice of Naam. And Captain Murray, who remember is the Englishman who Bhai Ratan Singh Ji tells this history to, and now Bhai Ratan Singh Ji then writes for the Khalsa to always have access to and share this history within themselves. Bhai Ratan Singh Ji says, then Captain Murray asked me more about Guru Nanak Dev Ji.
Babe Sakhi Kine Antana Lahayo.
That how extensive are these stories of Guru Nanak Dev Ji? Because Captain Murray, from at least what we find in the Panth Parkash, had some maybe faith towards Guru Nanak Dev Ji. On one hand, he is tasked with collecting the history of the Sikhs. On the other hand, he is a man who, when he starts to hear of the story of Guru Nanak Dev Ji, gets a promotion at work, and his own mind perhaps wonders that is this because of the greatness of Guru Nanak Dev Ji. And certainly this is what Bhai Ratan Singh Ji gives us. And very diligently, Bhai Ratan Singh Ji tells us that Captain Murray questioned him and tell me more and more and more. But because so much of this history was written already at Bhai Ratan Singh Ji's time in the 1800s, much of this history had been written long before Bhai Ratan Singh Ji writes it. Bhai Ratan Singh Ji says that I'm not going to tell you all of these stories in depth. You can instead look at certain sources where you will find these histories mentioned.
Babe Sakhi Mahagambir.
Bhai Ratan Singh Ji telling us that the stories of Guru Nanak Dev Ji are Maha, the stories of Guru Nanak Dev Ji are Gambir, they have much depth to them. And the history of Guru Nanak Dev Ji does have this much depth to them. The Janam Sakhis are extensive volumes. Nanak Parkash is an extensive volume. The verses of Bhai Gurdas Ji which talk about Guru Nanak Dev Ji's travels are enriched with philosophy that the more we understand, the more we realize how much depth is within them every time we read. So we have, in essence, and what we are doing is really summarizing Guru Nanak Dev Ji's travels, summarizing the message that Guru Nanak Dev Ji gave people, summarizing what Guru Nanak Dev Ji saw was happening at those times. And in doing so, we must be conscious that Guru Nanak Dev Ji's history, Guru Nanak Dev Ji's teachings, Guru Nanak Dev Ji's impact on this world is so much more extensive than we are able to capture in words, let alone in such shortened versions of stories.
Siddh Sadh Likh Thak Rahe Peer.
Bhai Ratan Singh Ji says the Siddhs, the great spiritual people, the Sadhs, many saints and many peers, many accomplished Muslims even, and beloved of God, that these people who are very virtuous and blessed with divine powers, that even these people have grown very thakage, that they have become tired of trying to write Guru Nanak Dev Ji's history and narrate Guru Nanak Dev Ji's greatness.
Bahut udasi babe kain.
The Guru Nanak Dev Ji's udasis were extensive. Guru Nanak Dev Ji travelled all through the world, and Guru Nanak Dev Ji spread the message of Eko Onkar, spread the Vaheguru mantra, spread the message of worshipping God within yourself and moving away from rituals that are perhaps not as fulfilling or enriched with the meaning as Naam is. Because in religion and spirituality, there can be nothing higher than telling one that what they are seeking is within themselves, and the method for doing that is also something which is yours. The ability to jap with your tongue, the ability to engage in a mantra with your swas, with your breath, the ability to sun, the ability to listen with your ears, and the ability to embed that Naam within your own hriday, your own heart. So all of these things are directing us towards a truth which is within ourselves. And when we venture out with of that, everything starts to become confusing for people who are maybe interested in the gods and goddesses, people who maybe are interested in the deities and the devtas. Then what we find is this thing can become obsessive. Bhai Gurdas Ji tells us that if we do this while also believing in the Guru, it is like having 1 foot in 2 different boats, and such a person is destined to drown. The reason being is that when we start to go towards God within ourselves, when we start to go towards the Satguru as the form of Nirankar, as the manifestation of the Formless One, we start to enter into those stages of one's evolution where they are heading towards the essence, where they are heading towards the truth in a very saturated form. And that truth is that everything is one. That truth is non-duality. that truth is a breath, and that requires a realization that there is only one. And in Sikhi, where we say that is Ad Sach, Jugad Sach, Happy Sach, and Nanak Supi Sach, that one which is true before time, before creation, at the point of creation, at the inception of time, throughout time, and until even after time is no longer here. The path towards that truth is Satanam. So Guru Nanak Dev Ji has blessed us that in Kaljug, in these difficult times, we are able to practice religion and spirituality and all the things that bring one enrichment in life in a way where we do not have to depend on very much that is out with us.
Hamate sabhi kab aaki gayi.
Bhai Ratan Singh Ji says, of course, it would be impossible. There is no way that I could have extensively gone into the stories and teachings of Guru Nanak Dev Ji here.
Babe sel akash di kina.
So Bhai Ratan Singh Ji tells us that Guru Nanak Dev Ji also travelled Akash. Now this will certainly interest those who are interested in other planets and other life forms, etc. And we find in Guru Nanak Dev Ji's ancient history reference to some of these. So for example, in the Janam Sakhis, where Guru Nanak Dev Ji went to Baghdad and entered into, or rather was approached by scholars who disputed Guru Nanak Dev Ji's theory of Patala, Patal, Lakh, Agasa, Agas, that there are hundreds of thousands of planets and hundreds of thousands of worlds. And when they said to Guru Nanak Dev Ji that show us these, Guru Nanak Dev Ji said to one of the Qazis, to one of the Muslim priests, that I will show these to your son. And Guru Nanak Dev Ji gave him this yatra. Guru Nanak Dev Ji gave him these visions of traveling through these places. And as we have done the exploration of space and continue to do so, we realize that actually there is no end to the depth of the universe, and that in this world we actually compromise a very, very small part of that, and our life is significant and meaningful only in the way that we have this as an opportunity of coming here to meet the creator of all of this. But Bhai Ratan Singh Ji tells us that if we speak only of what Guru Nanak Dev Ji did within this world, then we forget that Guru Nanak Dev Ji travelled out within this world too.
Babe sel bohokiyo jamina.
As Guru Nanak Dev Ji travelled throughout the lands far and near. Bahut Jamina, Bhai Ratan Singh Ji says, many, many lands, many, many countries, many, many cities, many towns, many villages, many islands even Guru Nanak Dev Ji travelled to.
Babe ki gat babo jane.
Bhai Ratan Singh Ji says, Guru Nanak Dev Ji alone knows their depth. Guru Nanak Dev Ji alone knows their secrets. Guru Nanak Dev Ji alone knows what they did during that time.
Ke jane jo naal firane.
And those know who Guru Nanak Dev Ji was in, jiri naal farane, jiri naal Guru Nanak Padshah Ji de naal jinna ne sair ਕੀਤੀ ਆ. Those who had travelled with Guru Nanak Dev Ji through the Udasis. And we know this was by Mardana Ji, we know this was by Bala Ji predominantly. And also at different parts of Guru Nanak Dev Ji's travels, they had people accompanying them. So for example, in parts of the Islamic world, they had prominent peers travelling with them. And also, when we think of, well, as Gursikhs, what significance does this history hold for us, and where does this sit comparative to Guru Granth Sahib Ji? So Guru Granth Sahib Ji is our Satguru, Guru Granth Sahib Ji is our Satguru, Guru Granth Sahib Ji is perfect, and Guru Granth Sahib Ji is our liberator, and we cannot actually compare anything that is a text, either in the form of history or read, to Guru Granth Sahib Ji, because Bani Guru hai Bani, which Bani Amrita Sari. The Bani is the Guru, and the Guru is within us. So, this status, it is incomparable. Vahu Vahu Bani Nirankar hai. The Bani is the formless God. So we cannot even begin any type of comparison there. However, history is also very important, because as beings living on this planet, history is something that tells us of our origins. Our origins are something which serve in making us feel rooted to this world and being able to uphold them on our identity. Because without history, we don't understand ourselves. If we don't understand ourselves, we don't know who we are. If we don't know who we are, then we gravitate from identity to identity without actually really taking our place within this world, passing many years without it. So when Bhai Balaji, who was one of the Gursikhs who travelled with Guru Nanak Dev Ji, came to see Guru Angad Dev Ji, Guru Angad Dev Ji had not yet met Bhai Balaji at this point, and Guru Angad Dev Ji saw a love for Guru Nanak Dev Ji on Bhai Balaji's face. And on one side, the Guru is all-knowing, but on the other side, the Guru plays life in such a way that allows us to see glimpses of their divinity in the human form. And this is their Leela, this is their play. The Guru Angad Dev Ji, seeing on Bhai Balaji a great love for Guru Nanak Dev Ji, a great blessing from Akal Purkh, thought, I have not met this Gursikh before. That how could it be that there is this Gursikh that has come to me with such a beautiful form, and I have not met someone like this before? Surely if there was such a Gursikh, I would have met them. And Guru Angad Dev Ji at this point were in Bairag. Guru Angad Dev Ji at this point were sitting, reflecting on Guru Nanak Dev Ji, meditating upon the Guru, because Guru Nanak Dev Ji at this point had shed their physical body. And Guru Angad Dev Ji thinks that what must Guru Nanak Dev Ji have been like before I met them? Because remember, Guru Angad Dev Ji's Bhai Lena comes into Guru Nanak Dev Ji's life much later on. And the Guru, when the Guru has a furna, when the Guru has a desire, that furna, that desire only takes place for the benefit of humanity. And on one side, where Guru Angad Dev Ji then has this furna, this trance-like meditation within which they wonder that this beloved Guru Nanak Dev Ji, what must they have been like before I met them? I only saw a small part of their life. At that point, Bhai Balaji appears. And when Guru Angad Dev Ji asks, Bhai Balaji responds, I am Bala, I am the servant of Guru Nanak Dev Ji. And I have come here with love, recognizing you as the second form of Guru Nanak Dev Ji, to offer you my servants and pay to you my respects, because this was very important for the continuation of Sikhi, where Guru Nanak Dev Ji had appointed Bhai Lena as Guru Angad Dev Ji, as one with Guru Nanak Dev Ji. Those Gursikhs, such as Baba Buddha Ji, who had been around Guru Nanak Dev Ji and reached a very prominent position, in then paying allegiance to Guru Angad Dev Ji, they helped keep Sikhi together. They helped protect it, and this happens throughout the history of the Gurus, from different cults that emerge and make up their own form of history, because those Gursikhs' experience and life lends itself towards other people accepting that this is now the Guru. So Bhai Balaji says to Guru Angad Dev Ji, what service can I do for you? I served Guru Nanak Dev Ji, I'm now an old man, is there any service I can do for you? And Guru Angad Dev Ji says, yes, you can tell me of Guru Nanak Dev Ji. You can tell me of Guru Nanak Dev Ji's life. You can tell me of the episodes from Guru Nanak Dev Ji's travels. So from these Sakya meaning stories, from these Sakya we have the Bhai Bala Janam Sakya. From these Sakya we have then other compilations that take place much later where this history is contained. But Guru Angad Dev Ji listened to these Sakya in a state of love for Guru Nanak Dev Ji. And it is that which we can get from history. By listening to history, we can learn of our identity, and we can also build a love towards a Guru. If we do not build that love towards a Guru and listening to the stories, then it is useless in a way, because Sikhi does not simply advocate that people accumulate knowledge, that people learn and read. Those things must serve us for our true purpose, and that true purpose is to meet God through love. Bhai Ratan Singh Ji says, however, because these Sakya have been covered, if I was to go into them in detail, then this Granth would become very extensive. Bhai Ratan Singh Ji says that had this history not been written before, then I would have written it, but it's already been written so extensively.
लिखते हम सब ही बहुत और
This is why I have gone into detail very little here, very little detail here, and not expressed as much detail as these stories that would even begin to do it some type of justice.
याते ए मैं सूचो तरो
But I have only told these stories by Ratan Singh Ji once again over and over because he doesn't want anyone to think at any point that the history that we have covered of Guru Nanak Dev Ji and Panth Parkash represents anything other than a tiny minuscule part of Guru Nanak Dev Ji's history. He's been clear about this over and over again, and I feel this talks greatly to Bhai Ratan Singh's humility.
आगे होए ना तो श्रम करो
He says, however, if this history had not been written, then I would have not had hesitated to have made the effort to write all of this history because it is so important.
जौन है साखी लिखी ना होए
He says that those sakhiya which had not been written, any of those details that had not been written,
जरूर है चाहिए लिख लई सोए
then it was important that those sakhiya were written. It was important that that context was written of.
दोहरा जो आगे है अतकने सो मैं कहीं कटाए
Bhai Ratan Singh Ji says that those stories that had already been written, I narrated those details in very short form.
आगे है परचन जो सो मैं दहियो प्रगटाए
And finally, Bhai Ratan Singh Ji in the last verse from this chapter says that some of those stories which had not been written, Giri Parchita, those which were Gupta, those that had not been established or were well known, and I have said some of these. So one of the important ways in which Bhai Ratan Singh Ji adds value to the understanding of early Sikh philosophy, and that is the tradition that he comes from. He came from within the Panth, he came from within the Khalsa, as the grandson of Bhai Natab Singh, as the grandson of Bhai Rai Singh, as the son of Bhai Rai Singh. He came from a family that for 100 years was immersed within battle for the very survival of the Khalsa. They did not have the luxury of going to education establishments, they did not have the luxury of going to the great education centres that were established at the time to learn many languages, to take time to reflect and pause and write on these history because they lived on horseback and they constantly had sword and shield within their hand. And the narrative of these people is often missed from Sikhi. If we look, for example, at the Nirmala literatures, if we look in the text of Bhai Gyan Singh, of Kavi Santokh Singh, they are writers who come from particular schools of thought within Sikhi. And Bhai Ratan Singh Ji comes from a different school of thought. If we look at the way in which Guru Nanak Dev Ji's union with Akal Purkh at the point at which Guru Nanak Dev Ji is immersed within the water is expressed as the meeting between the Nirankar, as the meeting between Guru, as the meeting between Guru Parameshwar and the Satguru, as the meeting between the avatar of the age and how that avatar as Puran Guru avatar differs from the avatars of other yugs. There are so many technicalities to this Katha, but Bhai Ratan Singh Ji gives us a different view on that because the whole view is around who do these Khalsa think they are, who do they think gave them the right to be rulers, and who on earth gave these people any authority and sovereignty because there is no legal basis for this. The whole point is that Raj came from Guru Nanak Dev Ji. And in the way that meeting Guru Nanak Dev Ji says that Akal Purkh embraced Guru Nanak Dev Ji, he says, you are the Raja of this yug, you are the king of the ages, you go and spread your message. Bhai Ratan Singh Ji gives us a way of understanding that we can relate directly to a community today, which perhaps we would not find within the writings of other scholars who came from purely intellectual institutions. So Bhai Ratan Singh Ji, although being very brief and very humble in the history they have given us on Guru Nanak Dev Ji, does indeed bring very important parts of Guru Nanak Dev Ji's life to our attention. And in closing this chapter, they tell us that some aspects of that history which were good, some aspects of that history that our community did not know or other writers had not reflected on, these I have made available. And Bhai Ratan Singh Ji has now concluded this chapter, so by reading the last 2 lines of this chapter, we will conclude the Katha for today.
दोहरा जो आगे है अतकणी सो मैं कही कटाए आगे है परछन जो सो मैं दहियो प्रगटाए
ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕਾ ਖਾਲਸਾ ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕੀ ਫਤਿਹ। ਜਕਾਰੇ ਜਾਵੇ ਨਿਹਾਲ ਹੋ ਜਾਵੇ ਗੁਰੂ ਨਾਨਕ ਸਾਹਿਬ ਜੀ ਨੂੰ ਪਾਵੇ। ਸਤਿ ਸ੍ਰੀ ਅਕਾਲ। ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕਾ ਖਾਲਸਾ ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕੀ ਫਤਿਹ।